Today we're going to talk about the properties of trapezoids and kites. So first, let's talk about what is a trapezoid. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral, not a parallelogram now, that has one pair of parallel sides. So there's my pair of parallel sides. In order for it to be isosceles, just like a triangle, it's a trapezoid that has congruent legs. This is a base angle, this is a base angle. Those are base angles. The parallel lines are always your bases, and then your legs here are the sides that are not parallel, and for it to be isosceles, those legs will be congruent. Now, what do we know about in a trapezoid? If you notice, both of these apply to only isosceles trapezoids, so we have to see that those legs are congruent. So in isosceles trapezoid, your base angles are congruent. So if you go back to the figure we had before, these two angles are the same measure, and these two angles are the same measure. One important thing you also need to remember, since your bases are parallel, we do have the angles that make a C will equal 180. So these two angles together will add to equal 180 as well. The other one we have is in an isosceles trapezoid, diagonals are congruent. So what we have here, if you can't make out the drawing too well, we have our isosceles trapezoid, and this diagonal is the same length as this diagonal. But what happens, they don't bisect each other. We have the two short parts up here the same measure, and the two long parts are also the same measure. We've talked about mid-segment before in a triangle. We do have a mid-segment in a trapezoid, and this is going to be true in any trapezoid, just as long as we have the segment that connects the midpoints of your legs. The mid-segment equals 1/2 times base 1 plus base 2. So you basically take your two bases, add them together, divide by 2. That will give you the measure of that mid-segment. The mid-segment is also parallel to both of the bases, if you can tell, which was also true of the mid-segment in a triangle. So here we have a trapezoid, and I know that angle BAD is 44. So BAD is this angle here. So that angle is 44. I want to find the measure of angle ADC. Well, if I remember, because this is isosceles, because those two legs are marked congruent, that means my base angles are congruent. So that means this angle is also 44 degrees. I'm going to go on and talk about, well, how would I find angle C and angle B? Well, remember I did mention, since these are parallel, that means these two angles here that make a C will equal 180. So if I want to find angle C up here, I do 180 minus 44, which would give me 136 degrees. So angle C would be 136 degrees. Which would also tell me angle B over here would also be 136 degrees. Now looking at this figure, we have a trapezoid, and it has a mid-segment. How do I know it's a mid-segment? Because this would be the midpoint of this segment, and this would be the midpoint of this segment. Notice this is not an isosceles trapezoid, but what we learned before is also true. Now, one nice thing that we know, if we're trying to find ML down here, I know if I take these two, add them together, divide by 2, I'm going to get this measure. Well, if we think about it the opposite way, we know 9 plus x is going to have to equal twice this amount, which would be 12. I'm sorry, twice the 12 would be 24. So I can subtract 9 from both sides, and x equals 15. One other thing I've had people notice is how far it is from here to here is the same from here to here. As in, from 9 to 12, you would have to add 3. So then I would just have to add 3 to this mid-segment, and that again would give me that base there would be 15. So that's a couple different ways that you could work out this problem. Now let's talk about what is a kite. Yes, it does kind of look like one of the kites that you fly in the sky, but the definition of it is two pairs of consecutive sides are congruent, but opposite sides are not congruent. So I have the pair of sides here are congruent, and then these two sides are also congruent. That is your definition of a kite. So, theorems we have for it. In a kite, diagonals are perpendicular. If you notice, that was the same as what we had in a rhombus. But a kite is not a parallelogram. But we do see that again. And then also, in a kite, there's exactly one pair of opposite angles that are congruent. So if we look, let me go back to my shape that's a kite. Here's my kite. The angles that are congruent are going to be those angles there. The angles where your short side and long side connect. Those are going to be your opposite angles. Now, if you like to see it, we also had the diagonals are perpendicular. So we again have right triangles here. One other thing that it did not mention is one of these diagonals does bisect one pair of opposite angles. The ones that are bisected is those two angles down there, and these two angles up here are going to be the same. So these entire angles are going to be congruent, but the angles down here the same measure because that's bisected, and this angle up here is also bisected. But these angle measures are not the same. So let's take a look at what I mean. So let me go through these theorems we've already talked about. And here's my kite. I have a measure up here of 18 degrees for this and 29 degrees for this, and I want to find angle X and I want to find angle Y. Well, the angles that I know are congruent will be an angle here and an angle here, but I don't know those measures. But we did talk about that we have diagonals that are perpendicular, so I know these are all right angles, so I already know one angle in each of my triangles. I said that if that one's 29, this is also 29, because one pair of opposite angles are bisected. So if that one's 29 and that one's 90, I can use that we have a triangle here and do 29 plus 90 would give me 119, and subtract that from 180. So that means angle Y here would have to be 61 degrees. Now to find angle X, I know angle X is also the same as this angle here. So if I'm looking at the little bitty triangle here, if this angle is 18 degrees and that one's 90, I can do the same kind of math to find the angle up there. So I can do 90 plus 18 will give me 108, and do 180 minus 108, so that would give me 72 degrees. So X here is 72 degrees and Y was 61. So that's what we know about all the angles in a kite.